Hi, folks. Welcome to, is this Tuesday? Tuesday's
Aye.
edition of the iWrite Radio podcast. I've got Stewart Lockhead with me today
Hi.
and Jimmy from his taxi studio.
All right, I'll just give folk a nice view of what we're looking at the moment,
What are we
sitting in a
looking at
taxi
here?
rank.
Oh, very nice.
All right, cool. Today, Sturgeon's making a statement in Parliament today, so there's no briefing to cover. Richie Sunak apparently is making a statement this afternoon.
I can't see it showing up anywhere at the moment.
It might be tomorrow then. So
That's what somebody said it was today, but
I certainly saw it as today. But we've got plenty enough to cover, I think. Jimmy's going to give us a wee breakdown of how he understands the proposed rule change to protect the NEC at the SNP conference. Stewart wants to have a pop at Granny's and Christmas. And I'd like to point out a strange new move afoot amongst our paper of record, the Times. So Jimmy, I haven't seen anything about this at all. So
Yeah,
an explanation would be handy.
it's a strange wee one, mate. They believe it's in some standing order through the conference committee, but the wording of it was very odd, in that people standing for the NEC. And my understanding of it was that people standing for the NEC could be disbarred from the actual election, depending on what had been published by them or their supporters, or said by them or their supporters.
What?
Yeah, the wording of it's almost nonsensical, mate, and it seems like an amateur attempt at gerrymandering by maybe one of these daft young clowns at Stirling Uni or something like that. Because if that was to stand, the first person who would lose his NEC seat would have to be Alan Smith, because his wee boy toy is one of the most offensive people I've ever met, and constantly on Twitter is on there offending people. So,
well, the first thing I would have to ask is, how do you prove somebody is one of your supporters?
exactly. As I say, mate, it looks like amateur gerrymandering from the wokest to try and keep the place. But I think it won't. The moment somebody speaks out against it at the conference, it will be dropped, because it's just a nonsense, and would have. I mean, how could you possibly prove anything? And it can't have any legal standing to disbar anybody from any election, can it?
well, I think the suggestion in the rule change is that they would be disbarred because of Electoral Commission rules. Well, the Electoral Commission rules have got nothing to do with internal wranglings in the SNP, have they?
It reeks of desperation, Stuart, doesn't it? It reeks like maybe they've taken a look at the actual candidate selections a few weeks ago and thought, hold it, wait a minute, the party are standing up against us here and we're going to get pumped.
Well, certainly the scuttlebutt I'm hearing is that the NAC is going to see some changes. Let's put it that way. I'm intrigued by the idea that the SNP, out with general elections and Holyrood elections and referendums on a national stage, have to follow the commission's
Electoral
rules.
Commission rulings on anything. Exactly.
Well, the logic of that is that if they're just standing for the NEC, but if they're standing as candidates for Holyrood, then that would be a different case. That would be the argument. But essentially, that rule fiddle, I think I agree with you, Jimmy. There was another part of it, though, or was it a separate part about they outlined the expenses that you had to forward to the NEC, and in your campaign to be elected to the NEC, how much you spent on your video, all the leaflets, printing, all that, and that only came out on the final the day of the deadline for your nomination to be in. So nobody knew what the rules were until they'd already put the nomination in.
Yeah, does sound like they're panicking to me.
Yeah, and it sounds like they've fallen right into the Labour Party NEC traps. So
Aye,
in effect, they're going to treat anybody who wants to stand for the NEC as though they're standing for Parliament.
worse than that, they're treating people who want to stand for the NEC as the enemy. Because let's be clear, this is all SNP members here, and one sect that feel they have control of the NEC at the moment are now worried that their power base is going to be diluted by other people taking seats on the NEC, and they don't like it.
Better not go through.
Well, I'm a bit worried that the Sturgeon loyalists will retain control. Pete Wishart hasn't put a long piece on his blog today, hasn't he? And I see Peter Bell didn't like it.
I don't have a problem with Sturgeon loyalists. I have a problem with people who are not loyal to the independence cause, first and foremost.
Not even loyal to the SNP, because front and centre of being a member of the Scottish National Party is to want the desire to bring about Scottish independence. They're loyal to whatever trendy wee cause they seem to be campaigning for at the moment, ahead of that.
And another point I think I really should make here is I don't like the idea of dividing the party between Sturgeon loyalists and AN other loyalists.
Aye,
that suggests that there is somebody standing against Sturgeon. Who is it?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
that's as far as I'm concerned, that's mainstream media talk.
I think a lot of this comes for the mainstream media, mate, but I think it comes for the carpetbaggers. I think there are people in relatively senior positions who have been placed there by the security services of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. I'll not name who I think they are.
You and Stewart been out for a pint together?
No, but I think there's a few of them, mate. I think it would be stupid to think there's no when you see just how deeply they had managed to infiltrate Sinn Féin and the IRA in the 80s and 90s.
That's true. Stewart, anything to finish on this?
Well, it's just the general down feeling I've got today about, I will, of course, after once the policy for the campaign towards Holyrood is decided after conference, I will support it. But I'm feeling depressed almost about the prospects for a positive campaign. Well,
if things go as I think we all hope they do, which is Holyrood in May, referendum in the 6 months after that, hopefully, the party has very little time to sort out what they need to sort out.
Well, that's what I was trying to reference yesterday by bringing up that poster for the RIC conference. That was nearly 2 years before the referendum. That excitement had built for 2 years before that referendum. Right now, there's no excitement.
Aye, but Stuart, that's because we knew the date of the referendum 2.5 to 3 years in advance. You know what I mean? We had that September date by very early in 2012. So we knew that we had a referendum coming up. This time it's going to be a short campaign. We're going to win the election next year, and hopefully within 6 months there'll be a referendum. It's going to be a short, sharp shock to the entirety of the British establishment, because they genuinely think they're going to be able to say, no, you can't have you, and we'll back down and just hunker down for another 5 years of Parliament.
And I mean, as long as the optimism about the various vaccines is well, it turns out to be true, then we will have time for an election campaign. 6 months from, well, it won't even 6 months from May. How many months is it to November, say?
Well, I think the Electoral Commission are going to insist on 6 months.
I think the Electoral Commission can go and take a run up their own hump, mate, at that point. I think, as I said yesterday, they can have input on the question, because we've always said that other than that, the Electoral Commission can go and whistle for me. It'll be made in Scotland by Scots for Scots.
I don't even like the original question, because I like the way Peter Bell objects to it today. It's still a supplicant asking for something rather than saying, like, we have every right to our independence.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Let's move on to Stuart's soapbox. You've got your juices flying today over agreeing with, I think, an article in Bella.
Yes, a guy called David Black. It's the headline that caught my eye, obviously. Have a very scary Christmas. Let's kill Granny. So if I was to throw in Cheltenham Gold Cup, Liverpool Atletico Madrid football match, 3,000 fans from Madrid, you'd both know what I was talking about, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
The delays to the serious effort to handle this pandemic way back in the spring. And the argument in this article is it's the same state of mind that Boris and gang are thinking about when they're thinking about Christmas. And the argument, David Black's argument, is I think he must live in the north of the country, by the way. North of, I think he lives in the north, where Christmas, when I grew up, Christmas was a very minor affair. I had friends at school that didn't even get presents at Christmas. They got a present at New Year. And I'm going to give you the contrast. The contrast when I moved from Glasgow to Bristol, just before Christmas, 1968 or 9 or something. And it was December, and I was out selling door to door around houses. And I was gobsmacked how Christmassy it was compared to Scotland. And I'm talking about moving from Glasgow, although I grew up mostly in the Highlands. And obviously things have changed considerably in 50 years. But Christmas is still an orgy of consumerism and spending money and a party. It's nothing to do with a Christian festival. It could easily be delayed. And if you want to come, I'll finish with this. And if you want to worry about New Year, Hogmanay could definitely be delayed until the 30th. And Rabbi Burns, or is it the 25th? And Burns night. We could at least delay it to Burns night.
I had my daughter in visiting today, and we were talking about the new rules. And I do think there is an element of people are going to do what they're going to do, regardless of the rules.
Yeah.
And I think the Four Nations meeting of minds on this is going to really revolve around how far can we ease this to keep control of it.
Damage limitation.
I really do think that's what's behind this.
Exactly. They're not going to be in control because people are going to have their Christmas regardless. So
yeah,
that's why they're doing it. And it's why they're also ramping up the expectation management by telling us that we'll basically be locked down for January and February.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, we've had the discussion in my household about how far are we going to go? You know, how many people will we see?
Mm-hmm.
And it is a kind of, it's bad timing in a lot of ways. We've got the 3 vaccines now, all looking good. People have had a huge sigh of relief that they look like they're going to do the job. Christmas is coming up, so there's something else to celebrate apart from the birth of Christ. It's the birth of 3 new vaccines. So there is going to be a kind of relaxation mentally. And I don't think any government is going to be able to lasso the population.
Well, can you imagine how excited the jet set got this morning when Matt Hancock told them that they could pay 120 quid and go on their skiing holiday as long as they got a test 5 days after they got back and they could cut their quarantine in half.
Well, that'll be a super spreader event, because that's where it started in this country, didn't it? People coming back from the Alps and bringing it.
That's exactly the reason that they've done that this morning, because it's, as I say, it's 120 quid for a test, so it's only certain people that can afford it, and it's so that those in the Westminster bubble who like their skiing can get their couple of trips away this winter.
I'm not sure. I think it would be very difficult politically not to relax things for Christmas.
I think you're right. I think, as you say, mate, people are going to have their Christmas anyway. So it's not really, they're not really controlling it. They're just saying, hands up, we know we can't control it, but please didn't go too overboard.
Yeah. Again, I was talking to my wife about this. I think Johnson's slogan is quite good. have a jolly careful Christmas.
I'll tell you what, Nicola's wee aside yesterday when she said that, of course, Christmas is different and the relaxation won't extend to Hogmanay. Idol. You try telling that to the folk wondering about a la Billy Connolly for all them years ago with a carry out in one hand and the lug up in the air listening for a party on Hogmanay. Scotland will have their Hogmanay regardless of what anybody's got to say about it.
Yeah, well, I don't want to be the Grinch, you know. I mean, there's a quote here. In the Dreich midwinter, this is David Black. In the Dreich midwinter, of course, having a bit of fun fair lifts the spirits. After all, the Druids had their solstice. The Romans are Saturnalia. So why shouldn't we let go a bit? It's only fair. But fun can be deferred, especially if it saves Granny's life.
And I think that is going to be the line that Sturgeon takes. I think Sturgeon is going to go down there. Okay, we've said X number of households can meet over Christmas as a special dispensation, but you have a personal responsibility to protect your
Granny.
own folk.
So Granny's going to be locked away for Christmas.
Well,
you can bide in the room there and we'll bring your dinner in, Granny.
Well,
I wish you stopped talking about Granny. I'm not digging mine up again just so I can protect her over Christmas.
Oh dear, oh dear. Okay, we've given Christmas a bit of a doing. My particular bugbear today is the newspaper of record, the Times of London. There's 3 different articles in it today. The first one I read, Scottish doesn't need independence to engage with the world.
Who's that by?
Anthony Salomon.
Oh, this is the fellow who's got an office in Southbridge, Edinburgh.
Yeah, well, the first article, which is the one, he's suggesting that Scotland should have its own foreign policy, and effectively it can go out and meet with other foreign leaders and all the rest of it. Obviously, he's not a man that reads the mainstream media very much, because every time anybody from Scotland goes and meets a leader of a foreign country, all hell breaks loose amongst the unionists, because Nicola Sturgeon or whoever it is undermining the British government policy.
He clearly didn't read Michael Gove's letter that got published yesterday.
Well, but that's the first one. The second one is Alex Massey, who has been on my radar for a while. The Four Nations approach vindicates unionism. Now, the headline is very misleading, because that's not what he's really saying at all. What he's saying through the article is the status quo is okay. It's better than how bad it used to be when the Scottish Secretary basically represented Scotland in the cabinet and at Westminster. Now our Scottish Secretary represents the Tory party in Scotland, not the other way around. And he seems to think that nearly good enough is more than good enough. So independence isn't necessary.
He's kind of greeting that unionists can't wave saltires anymore.
His point is, I mean, I remember Tories who were basically Scottish nationalists within the union. Scotland was important to them. Now it can't be. The union has to be more important.
But
I think he makes a good point there.
It's not so much things have changed in Scotland, it's things that have changed in London.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you.
Aye, it's the British nationalism that has taken over UK politics has absolutely changed the way that Tories have to be. You can't be a one-nation Tory. You've got to be a Brit now.
Although there is an argument, of course, I read somewhere, was it this morning, one of the articles you suggested we have a look at was the divide in the Tory party is between the Unionists and the English nationalists. And the English nationalists are winning at the moment inside the Tory party.
I
think Massey's trying to search for that middle ground that Douglas Ross is trying to play to. That he is a patriotic Scot, but he's a Tory, he's a Conservative, and he's British as well. I think they're trying to lay that out that ground for Dougie Ross so that he can campaign on it next year for the election. But that ground doesn't exist anymore. To get on in the Tory party, in fact, to represent the Tory party now, you have to agree with Boris. And Boris has moved the entire party to the right so that they can't be outflanked on the right by Nigel Farage.
But bear in mind that Boris has no principles, and he'll just go with where he thinks he can remain in power, won't he?
Well,
but Boris isn't there for the duration, mate. It's the actual apparatus of the party. Everything about the party now makes it a British nationalist party. And if Sunak gets a job, whether it's Sunak or Gove, that part of the party, when they change, in fact, Boris is probably more centrist than most of the party is now. He went onto their ground in order to get the leadership.
Yeah.
I think you're wrong in one of your descriptions. I don't think they're a British nationalist party. I think they're now an English nationalist party.
English nationalist. You're probably right.
Britain as England, England as Britain.
Well, the surveys that they do in Scotland, people in Scotland, generally speaking, people regard themselves as Scottish. 75% of people are Scottish first, whereas it's totally different in England.
I think they're panicking. I really think they're panicking about this Scottish election because they're only a few points clear of Labour. And it'll be an absolute disaster for the Tories if they do not finish second in the election.
How can they not, with the collapse of Labour?
I know, but they're only a few points ahead, mate. If they have a bad campaign and Labour have a decent campaign, i.e. by that I mean somebody breaks Richard Leonard's legs and leaves him sitting out most of the campaign, they could beat them to second place, and that would be an absolute disaster for the Tories because their entire offering to Scotland is based on only the Tories can fight the SNP. So if they don't finish second, that would be a disastrous result. And also it means that Dougie Ross, they've just parachuted in a leader that's come up with the worst results since Annabelle Goldie.
I think it's more basic than that. I think that in order to stay second, they're prepared to take on board as policy most of what the SNP have done. They've already said they'll go along with the tuition fee situation in Scotland. I fully expect them to go for free prescriptions.
Well, look, it's interesting that you're touching on the policies that they've switched to adopting in Scotland, the Tories with Ross. They are the policies that the middle class are happy with. After all, it's tuition fees. Free tuition fees affect the middle class. Now, one of the arguments we've discussed fairly recently is that the middle classes have now come aboard to support the SNP following the Brexit vote.
Which might well be why they're changing policy.
Yes, exactly. They're massaging the SNP policy to suit the middle classes so they don't lose them. Well, bearing in mind, they're maybe not huge in numbers, but they're powerful. They're in important jobs.
Well, we have the interesting position where a man elected on the Tory manifesto, Douglas Ross, to Westminster, is now changing the platform that the Scottish Tories are going to stand on. So why is he still at Westminster? Why hasn't he resigned? Because he obviously doesn't agree with either the Westminster manifesto that he was elected on, or he's lying about the manifesto he's trying to put forward for the Holyrood elections.
He's not. It's not about disagreeing. Come on, the principal qualification to be a Tory politician is you have to be good at lying. That's all.
Yeah, but I'm saying, one day somebody is going to turn around to him on national television and say, right, at Westminster, you support the manifesto you were elected on. Yes, I do. But in Scotland, the manifesto you want to be elected on is diametrically, in some instances, opposed to the manifesto at Westminster. Which is it, Mr. Ross?
I'll swear a bit, that's all.
Well,
yeah, you're probably right. I think as well they're looking at their core support and realising that that's fracturing. Remember the elections in May, so by that point they could very well have lost an awful lot of fishermen as well as the farmers that we talked about yesterday.
That was interesting, that article in Scottish Farmer.
The core support's falling apart, and that's why they're desperately trying to find some new form of appeal and not be the English Nationalist Party, because being an English Nationalist Party in a Scottish election is a recipe for disaster, isn't it?
It is. It is.
So the third article, there's 3 articles in the Times today. The third one is about what the mainstream media are presuming is a move from unilateral nuclear disarmament to multilateral disarmament from the SNP. Now, I don't think asking the Westminster government to go to a multilateral stance affects a unilateral stance by the SNP. They're simply asking the Westminster government not to go quite as far as the SNP want, but to go further down the disarmament route. So that aside, the 3 articles that I've just talked about, I think are real indicators that the unionists are getting very scared. 2 of them have suggested routes which are just ridiculous. Scotland should have its own foreign policy, and that we should return to a situation where effectively Westminster controls Scotland, but we get to pay lip service to whatever, whoever's in charge at Westminster.
Well, if we rewind and remember what history, how Ireland got this, the era got its independence. It was bit by bit.
Well,
Give me a second, guys.
It was bit by bit. They weren't even right up to almost World War II. They still.
Sorry, guys, I've got a fear I'll have to disappear.
No problem.
okay, James, go forth and make much old money.
Yeah, it makes a good story. Excellent, excellent. I mean, it didn't happen like in 1922. It was bit by bit. Do you know what I mean, Nori?
Yeah, but I think
they hung on to
it. Came in a rush at the end.
No, not really. It took all the way. It took 22 years before Ireland was actually.
That's actually, you had a couple of one world war in the middle of that as well. Remember?
Well, no, I'm talking from say 1918 to 37. It's not quite. That's 19 years, isn't it? But they had quite nearly 20 years then. I mean, I think it was 1937 before they actually had proper full independence.
And they had a violent struggle as well.
And they had a civil war at the start of that period as well.
Which we don't want to go down the route of.
Basically, Britain stayed out of it for a long time. They didn't want anything to do with it. Once they got rid of it, Ireland, they just didn't want anything to do with it.
Well, I actually think that beneath all the posturing and policy differences, that's the thrust. Make the English so hacked off with us that they're happy to see the back of us. I think that's the policy.
I'd like to throw in something that struck me going on the marches. The 2 years of marching, and I really did go to a lot of them. And it became very noticeable how many middle-class people were marching. Yes, the working classes were out there, but there was no question of it. There were teachers, there were lawyers, there were all kinds of businessmen, and there were a lot of them were, 50, 60. And if they were out there marching, not just supporting, that would support the argument that what the SNP has been doing recently is massaging their policies, contributing to the UK's defence posture with a paper by Stewart MacDonald and Alan Smith. What you just said about multilateralism rather than unilateralism.
Well, yeah, but
tuition fees, these all fit in with that agenda.
Yeah, but first off, I don't believe the SNP have moved from a unilateral stance against nuclear weapons, and I don't think they will. I don't think they can. It's the backbone of a huge part of their support. They're not going to do it. It was a difficult enough step to start to supporting NATO membership. They're not going to give up on unilateral disarmament.
I would hope not, because it's been dear to my heart all my life. But
they're not going to do it.
Well, it's not a hot topic these days. It's never in the front pages of the papers, is it?
It will be. It will be, because it's an issue. It's a kind of double-edged sword for the mainstream media, the unionist press, this one, because if they start pushing the SNP's move to multilateral disarmament as the SNP policy, that will encourage, if you like, your middle classes to come on board. And they don't really want to encourage people to come on board. What they want to do is discourage people. So the other side of that particular coin is that those people like us who believe in unilateral disarmament leave the party and go to the Greens, which is still an independent supporting party. So it doesn't really do the unionist cause any good. It simply gives the press an opportunity to try and drive a wedge between two different parts of the SNP, which I'm not sure actually exist. I'm pretty sure that the vast majority of SNP members are unilateralists.
I'm a unilateralist, but I would still, and I'm a Republican, but I would accept an initial Scottish government with some weird fiddle of a deal over Faslane for maybe a few years, just to get our independence, a proper independence.
Well, I don't think you have a choice. I don't think you can tell them to move nuclear subs and the infrastructure on the first day of independence.
Of course you can.
I think that has to be negotiated sensibly and safely. I think we all understand that. Well, I hope we all understand that.
But it's things like Andrew Wilson wanting to hand £5 billion a year from an independent Scotland to the UK for what? We should be charging them £5 billion a year as long as that base is there.
Well, let's wait and see what comes out of that. But
where's the thinking behind that?
It's about being a sensible member of the world community. You know, I mean, some of that debt is ours.
No, it's big. No. Well, I can't agree with you on that. Let's not go down that road. I don't agree with you on that.
Well, no, wait a minute, Stuart. I mean, if we have benefited from money that's been borrowed by the UK government, I think we're obliged to pay it back.
We have been robbed of an oil bonus completely, which totally counterbalances that in the last 30 years.
Well, and I dare say over the last 300 years, we've been robbed of a lot more. But if you want to take that into account, take it into account. Ask for a tenth of all the embassies.
But it's the idea that you would even come up with that idea, Andrew Wilson, that makes me just doubt, where has his brain been? Between his legs?
Well, he's one of your middle class economisty types. You know, he believes that I believe we have an obligation. I do.
To whom?
I mean, I don't see why, if the UK government borrows £10 billion to get enough vaccines, and £2 billion of that is to vaccinate Scots, are we not obliged to pay our share of that?
Yes, but how much of that are they going to pay back? Goodness me, apparently even Andrew Neil has started to get a grasp on modern monetary theory and said yesterday, you know, they've borrowed all this money, but they've actually just borrowed it from themselves.
Yeah, and they're paying the interest to themselves.
They're paying practically no interest. There's negative interest. People, you know, the pension funds are still buying bonds or whatever, gilts, and they're paying to borrow to lend money. Oh.
Well, as I say, I mean, it'll come out in the wash. That particular argument about how much money Scotland should pay England will be leverage. It will be part of the bargaining.
Can I just rewind a wee bit, because you brought up the Greens, and we were talking about the potential result of a May election, and I was a little surprised to hear the notion from Jimmy that the Tories might be overtaken by Labour. When you consider the state of Labour in Scotland, what about the position between the Greens and Labour? Because bear in mind, the Greens are further to the left of the SNP. On social policies, they lined up much closer to the current Labour in Scotland, do they not?
the Labour Party in Scotland, I think, lies between the SNP and the Tories. I don't think the SNP are right of Labour.
Well, on social policies, I would disagree. But
Really?
the point is that the Greens certainly regard the Labour Party's vote as their target for this up and coming May election. That's who they'll target, not the SNP, Labour Party.
If 42% of the Labour vote support independence, and independence is the issue we all think it's going to be at this next election, the Greens will be aiming for that, that portion of that vote that cannot bring itself to vote for the SNP. But the SNP will be after it as well. But the other side to that is I think the SNP could mop up a lot of disgruntled Tory voters. If the fishing deal breaks Brexit, either way, I mean, if the fishermen don't get what they want, where are their votes going to go? Are they going to go to Labour? They're going to go Green? Maybe they just won't vote. The farmers don't look as though they're going to be very happy with the deal. There's no guarantees yet about an equivalence to the EU grants they used to get. So there's a whole chunk of Tory votes that might not go anywhere else, but might not go Tory. People might just abstain.
Well, do you remember that 500,000 pro-independence voters didn't turn out to support the SNP in 2015? Is that situation about to be mirrored again next spring?
They better work really hard at getting the vote out this time. Really hard. Because if the papers are all giving them 53, 54, 55% of the constituency vote, a lot of people are going to think it's a done deal. So it needs to be emphasized. This is a vote for Indy. You need to get out and put your X in the box. And they need to start that pretty soon. It needs to be on the front pages, in my opinion.
Aye, well.
Anything else catch your eye today?
Not really, apart from the word that Alex Salmon seemed to come up with in that article you referred. The Vindicationists. I've never heard of them. The Vindicationists. Are they going on vacation?
Sorry, remind me.
They are no enthusiasts for independence any more than those who subscribe to build the Wallace Monument. Unionists. This was Alex Massey's argument about the patriotic unionists.
I've got a lot of time for Alex Massey. He's my go-to unionist writer when anything pops up that looks like it might be important, because I think he's quite sensible. I'm not sure I think this article was particularly realistic.
I wasn't particularly referring to that, the article. I was just thinking it was a wonderful work to come up with. I'll be dreaming about vindicationists tonight and trying to think what the hell they get up to.
It looks like Massey is going to move to a kind of home rule stance, along with Rifkin.
They're going to go. What they're going to go if they do a deal, it'll be on Section 30, and it won't be a binary referendum. It'll include devolution. That's what they'll get granted, and the idiots will accept it. And of course, the independence will be lost.
Well, let me be blunt about this. If they want a home rule question on the same ballot as a question about independence, as far as I'm concerned, it's going to have to be enacted before whatever referendum. They're going to actually have to initiate it, because I don't believe they will if they win the vote.
Yeah, but will they get the devolutionists? Because it would appear, I mean, from everything that Andrew Wilson said in his latest article, to me, he's a devolutionist, not an independista. And there's a lot of people seem to support him.
I think he's a gradualist, certainly. I don't think he's a devolutionist. I mean, there's huge questions. how do you engage Westminster in the argument for, well, let's just say more devolution? What happens if you have three parts to the question and it drops out 30%, 30%, 30%?
There you go.
You know, I mean, what if independence gets 35%, devolution gets 30%, and the status quo gets 32%?
You know, that it's all these complications that make me think that Peter A. Bell is pure and simple. Dissolve the union. It's the one thing everybody can agree on. Let's just dissolve the union, take our independence, and then we start again. Nice clean sheet.
Well, your problem
can-
with that is nobody in government at the moment wants to do it Peter's way.
And yet, once you've done that, you can then negotiate federalism if you want from a position of strength.
Nobody, I'm not disagreeing with that. All I'm saying is it's pie in the sky. There is no way an independent Scotland will be allowed to exist in order to negotiate for some sort of federalism.
So
That's
there'll be
just
no
not going to
way an
happen.
independent, a deal will be done to go and then go to a simple binary referendum.
If by
Or
next
is that the
year,
compromise?
if by the end of next year we have a referendum and Scotland is independent, you can bet your bottom dollar that one of the things on the negotiating table will be a form of federalism
Oh, aye.
when they sit down to discuss borders and agreements and
That's what's coming.
so on. You know, so, you know, we can have the bestest ever trade deal, which will be worth absolutely nothing the minute we join the EU. Rejoin the EU. So, you know, it's pie in the sky. Well, it's not pie in the sky. It's a delaying tactic for Westminster. The longer they can make this sound like it's a possibility, the longer they get to delay the inevitable independence referendum that's coming. That's all it is. And there's no way they're going to give us, well, I mean, the only home rule I would accept is a veto, the right to hold an independence referendum whenever the Scottish Parliament votes for it. That's two prerequisites for me.
Can I ask you a question that really shouldn't be asked, but I'm going to ask you anyway? Is there no circumstances at all, let's say in 10 years' time, when it could be too late to ask for to ask the people of Scotland to vote for independence because the circumstances will have changed so much?
What's the question?
That's the question.
What, is there no way?
Imagine it's possible. Is it possible in 10 years' time with climate change, Brexit, the war? We didn't expect this pandemic. We don't know what's coming. 10 years' time, this so-called majority of the young could fritter away.
No. Not unless there is a sea change from Westminster. Not unless they introduce Devo Home Rule Max. That's the only way. Literally, Scotland would have to be. The only way I could see it changing is if England, Britain, call it Britain, was a safety net for what Scotland was doing as basically an independent nation.
A safety
That's
net?
the only, yeah.
I don't understand
That's the only way I could see.
What do you mean by safety net?
Well, I mean, to be close enough that if there was a disaster in Scotland, England, Wales, and Ireland would bail us out.
What kind of a disaster?
I don't know, a pandemic. I don't know.
Okay.
You've just said we can't tell. But the only way is if Britain was there as a safety net, which it is not at the moment, regardless of what the unionists say.
What do you want the safety net for? I don't understand your concern about it.
I'm not saying that's what I want, but that's the only conditions under which I could see a basically independent Scotland wanting to stay tied to Britain.
I can see the reality is that we share these islands we will always share these islands. It's an archipelago of islands, and there's no getting away from it. We will share it with the Irish, the Northern Irish, the Welsh, and the English. And the English are, without the rest of us. If England was on its own, it's possible that Cornwall might demand different status. Let's say Cornwall might ask for the status of Jersey or the Isle of Man, because if you've been there, you understand it. You'd be surprised how many Cornish flags there are fluttering around the southwest of England.
I am almost certain that if Scotland and Northern Ireland were to break away, whether Northern Ireland became independent or it became part of Ireland again, and Scotland independent, that will force some sort of federalism in England. I'm pretty sure that will be one of the undiscussed outcomes of Scottish independence, which will probably be used to stop Wales becoming independent as well.
It's difficult for Wales because they've never been.
Well, as bits get chopped off Britain and England as Britain shrinks, so does their influence and power. And that's what they're worried about. I mean, that is what worries them. It's not an independent Scotland. It's that their power diminishes if Scotland goes. That's the reality.
Oh.
Anyway, we've gibbered on for a very long time.
I'm surprised we managed to talk for so long.
So I think we'll call it a day at that, folks.
And we've what have we got? 20 past 2, we can expect the First Minister to announce any possible changes to the levels. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for that, for having me on, Norrie.
Well, thanks, Stuart, and thanks to Jimmy, who got a fare. Maybe we're a good luck charm for him.
Yes, I think he should come on every day, and exactly, and he'll get a fare every time he comes on. People will be saying, "Oh, look, there's the taxi driver. He's on the telly."
Aye, hopefully. So I hope you enjoyed the show today, folks, and we'll see you all tomorrow, which is Prime Minister's Questions.
PMQs, and Sunak might be announcing his spending statement.
We'll sort that out for you, and we'll make sure we watch the Sunak statement. Cheers for now, folks. Thanks for listening.